Good morning, everyone. We have witnessed multiple discussions since yesterday around multi-level actions by different stakeholders, including local administrations, national governments, civil society organizations, communities, citizens, and other key partners, including indigenous peoples, in advancing subnational climate actions. This last panel in this conclave, Decentralized Green Deals, Enabling Subnational Actions for Green Development, with this team of panelists, actually brings back the focus now to the critical role of subnational governments as drivers of transformation for net zero emissions and for achieving national and international climate goals. I shall invite the panelists to give their opening remarks for about 3 minutes. We shall follow this up with a question for another round of brief intervention, followed by the Q&A segment with the audience at the end. With that, Mr. Pyush Dogra, I request you to make your introductory remarks for setting the context for the idea of decentralization of Green Deals, and more about, of course, the World Bank's initiative in Meghalaya.
Thank you. Good morning, in fact. This is not the last session, and it would be much more interesting session, and we have a long way to go in this whole debate about nature solves. I think the Green Deals enabling subnational action of the green development is one of the exciting topics which we are discussing this. To promote green development, these initiatives have gained significant attention and recognition for empowering subnational governments to take the lead in implementing sustainable policies and actions tailored to their specific regional context. By developing decisions, making authority, providing necessary resource, and fostering collaboration, decentralized green deals enable subnational entities to drive local green transformation, which is happening currently in the state of Meghalaya. This has 4 pillars broadly. Just wanted to set that context here so that we can discuss these more broadly. Empowering subnational government is one of the pillars when we are talking about decentralizing or the green development. Decentralized green deals prioritize the empowerment of subnational governments, recognizing their unique understanding of local challenges and opportunities. By way of developing decision-making authority and providing necessary resource, subnational governments are enabled to tailor policies and actions that address region-specific environment, social and economic priorities. The second pillar is tailored regional strategies. This is another important aspect where subnational governments are encouraged to identify their unique strengths and challenges, allowing them to design comprehensive strategies that address the specific green development priorities. Third pillar goes towards collaborative governance and stakeholder engagement. Decentralized green deals thrive on the collaborative governance and stakeholder engagement, which is prime point of discussion here. And one important aspect, which is the last pillar, is financing and technical assistance. Financing technical assistance play a crucial role in the success of decentralized green deals. Subnational governments often require support to access funding, develop green investment projects, and implement sustainable practices. International organizations come in the help of these decisions. Therefore, there are certain successful examples as well on the European Green Deals and various subnational climate action plans which demonstrate the effectiveness of decentralized approaches in driving green development. However, having said that, in context of India, there are other silos and many developments which have taken place by individual governments within India, and every state has come forward. We would like to focus also on the Meghalaya, which got a substantial starting point through this World Bank community-led landscape management project in 2018, starting with a landscape approach, which proved a model for the development of green initiatives, aligning their policies to those green initiatives, and bringing out a model for national level to follow on subnational good initiatives in the areas of green development. I just wanted to mention about Green Meghalaya campaign, which has gone based on this CLAMP approach. CLAMP approach is very simple. It talks about invest in people by providing intensive training, empower communities to work collectively to manage natural resources. I'm very happy to be part of this campaign from the World Bank side as the task team leader of this project, where government recognized projects interventions on integrated planning and natural resource management, and then took it as a model of development for rural development in one context, which has larger on the the national level Manrega scheme. It has given a model to Manrega scheme. It has brought landscape approach to the state, and it has aligned its policy towards green Meghalaya. I'll stop here, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving your time. I just have a quick follow-up question for you since you brought up the banking perspective. Could you quickly in 2 minutes tell us what role can banks play for creating innovative mechanisms, financing mechanisms?
So this is also a very pertinent question. You know, for example, green policies, the governments at the subnational level doesn't go so open to these policies. So you need some incentive, some support from those sides. I think from the institutions like multilateral banks, World Banks, and other institutions come forward with the support on these green initiatives in the form of green bonds or in the form of other innovative green financing approaches, which is mixed with the broader financing support, but also technical assistance, which is a sort of grant to them. And then they can utilize these for developing better projects, which can be a pilot project from the perspective of understanding, but then upscaling becomes simple for the government through their own funds. I'll stop here.
Thank you. And with that context, Mr. Ashutosh, could you tell us more about MBMA's vision for taking up this initiative here?
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Now, just reorienting myself to the subnational context. In our country, subnational means states, basically. Every state or every subnational region has to chart out its path of sustainable development according to the realities, the biogeographic circumstances, the socio-economic circumstances of the state. So while we conceptualize some initiatives under CLEM project, under the MBMA initiatives, we definitely looked into the circumstances, the realities of the state first. And as we are all aware, that in Meghalaya, which is a forest-rich state, it has got 76% area under forest cover. And the forests are largely owned by communities and individuals. So this is the reality. There are very good forests which are under the ownership of communities, which have been maintained, managed by them using their traditional wisdom over the centuries, in fact. And they continue to be very rich, biodiversity rich, and otherwise also very good forests. So while we in fact, when we were conceptualizing conservation of these forests under this CLEM project, we looked at the economics and the sustainability of our forest ecosystems in the state. And then we realized that when sustainability has to looked into, it has to be ecological sustainability, social sustainability, and also economic sustainability. Now, again, simplifying this sustainability aspect, we looked at it from the perspective of the communities, and there our focus was on the livelihood. And the second was on the natural capital, that is the forest itself. So, considering both of these, we in fact came out with two initiatives, which I will mention in this session. One was payment for ecosystem services. I think we all have heard about that. And the other was preparing forest management plans. So one, for PES, we were centric to the communities, recognizing their role and ethos for conservation, the services which they are offering for generating ecosystem services, how to value that and how to compensate them. So this PES concept came out of that. But at the same time, we were conscious that unless this natural capital is conserved, sustainably managed, they will not be able to even derive this in a sustainable manner. So we came out with the methodologies and initiative of preparing forest management plans, and that has been standardized. Now 400 forest management plans across the state have been already prepared. Now we are attempting more plans of these community forests. And similarly, payment for ecosystem services, that has been rolled out by the Honorable CM. And there is a linkage between forest management plan and payment for ecosystem services, because the forest management plan sets the benchmarks, the management prescriptions, and they have to follow that while, and in lieu of that only, based on their performance, they will get the incentives. And for just a minute, for doing that, for facilitating these incentives, we have also developed our own MRV protocol. And that MRV protocol will be used for determining the quantum of payment in future.
Okay, thank you. And we've been, of course, hearing about the CLAMP principles since yesterday. Could you tell us how you suggest that this can actually become a global model to put an architecture in place where this can actually be universally applied?
I think it will be too ambitious to suggest this as a global model, but definitely there can be learning from the innovative, I will say at this stage, experiment which we have done under the CLAIM project. But as I said initially, that it is tailored to our own situation, our own circumstances in the state. Definitely, there are elements which can be followed by other states in this region, because they also have similar forest ownership patterns. There are community forests in other neighboring states, hilly states. So definitely that can be followed by them, and then we can definitely share our experiences with other countries for learning from them also, and also sharing our experiences with them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rafiq, we will come to you now. Could you tell us about the initiatives being taken up at the subnational level in Maldives?
Good afternoon, and Kuble Yapi Maro. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me here, and also the Chief Minister, the state government, and the people of Meghalaya for the great hospitality you have been giving us. As you know, Maldives, we are at the front line of the climate change battle. We are a very low-lying island nation, just 1 meter above sea level. So we are the most vulnerable in the climate change battle. And the not so good news is, as a small country, no matter what we do, we have little global impact. So I think that's why it's important for us to believe, and for the policymakers to keep in mind the message we have on the front of the file: one Earth, one family, one future. One Earth, one family, one future. So though we are small, we have not lost hope. We are doing a lot we can do. I come from Formula, which is a small island city of 5 square kilometers, of 11,000 residents. And at the local level, the whole island has been designated as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. So I think this will help us to create more value for the ecosystem and the biodiversity. And also, 1/3 of the island is a protected area. And previously this was managed by the central government. So now it has been given to the local council. So we have 2 levels, the national government and the local council, which I am the mayor of. And since 1/3 is a huge area of the island, people are asking, why do you protect the area? What is the benefit for us? So it's a challenge for us to convince people of the benefit of the protection and how we can actually make money from that in the future. And I think that we have to ask a question at this stage: why are we here at this stage? And I think that is because of as individuals, the lifestyle choices we have made in the past. So one of the key focus of the council is to create awareness among the individuals, among the public, to adopt a more green lifestyle. And I think without that, no matter what we do, we cannot see the change we want to see happen in the climate arena. So we are very much focused on making sure that every individual is conscious of the environment, they adopt a green lifestyle, they are not fully driven by a consumption-based lifestyle, which is creating more demand on all the causes of the pollution and the issues we see faced right now. So I think most focus we are putting on the awareness and the individual change, the lifestyle change we want to see.
Mr. Fik, my question to you is, what are some of the challenges that are faced by local governments, and how do you think national governments can support and strengthen these plans of subnational governments?
I see two main areas of challenges. One is the area of technical expertise, technical know-how. Of course, we have the local knowledge, but I think it has to be combined with scientific knowledge for a more sustainable solution. And in that regard, I think we would like to see more local government presence in international forums like this. Because we face the action, we know what's happening, and the people, we are working closely with the people. So I think the national governments should give more freedom, more autonomy for the local governments to be present, forums like this, where we can share the experience, where we can learn from other councils, other state governments, subnational governments. And I think we have been able to do that in the past. We have attended some knowledge sharing and replication workshops where we have learned from experts on what has worked, what has not worked, and the experience of the state and the local governments. And I think we also have plans to invite experts. Maldives is a nice country for holiday. So if you're a retired professional, come, stay with us. We take care of your accommodation and food. You live the community. You help us to guide our planning. And it's open to all of you as an invitation. And lastly, on the funding side, we have big challenges. And I think local governments has to have more link with international funding agencies like UN, UNDP, and the World Bank. And we are working with the World Bank on projects like the solar project. We have 2 megawatt project right now going on. And one more thing as a last point, we cannot continue to rely on free aid, free grants to subsidize and finance our climate initiatives. So we have to find a way to monetize it, either through carbon credits, through various taxes, green tax or carbon tax, through ecotourism. So for a sustainable model, we have to have a monetized model for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Camila, I think that flows right into your arena with your work at Rio and the financial barriers that you typically face. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Anisha. Thank you, ORF and MBMA teams for the kind hospitality and the invitation, and also the city of Meghalaya for set up such an amazing event. I want to come back for something that I think we are discussing this past few days, which is the role of the cities and the subnational governments in drive climate change. It's of course, I have to raise the attention to the fact that cities are key contributor to climate change. Since urban activities are major sources of greenhouse gas emissions, estimates suggest that cities are responsible for more than 70% of global CO2 emissions, with transport and buildings being among the largest contributors. In that sense, politics conducted by local and subnational governments are the entry point to implementing climate action. But what happens nowadays is that our cities' needs are not seen as the main point of resources destination. Climate change is already part of our day-to-day lives. We can easily identify it when we are confronted with extreme heat, with flooding, with storms, with the sea level rise. And we know that the most affected and vulnerable populations are located in low and middle income countries. And our populations are facing these conditions at the highest risk. So yet the overwhelming majority of climate finance for cities is dedicated for mitigation projects, and only 90% of global urban climate investment is currently dedicated to adaptation projects. So this reality does not allow us to imagine a real future or even a reliable present. We need to allocate financial resources differently. And it's not about the resources that we don't have and that the developed countries are not delivering. It's also about the financial that we receive that is not going to the right direction. In general, local governments are made to deal mostly with urgent matters and emergency situations that cross their administrations. So cutting the capacity to develop and grow without taking care of population, of their citizens, is not solving their problems. Our problems, and cities need to increase the capacity to decarbonize so they can start to transition to a green future. And this, for doing this, just to sum up, I would like to say that fight the climate emergency is also to take care of our people. The disparities in access to capital for green transformation update a colonizing culture and also creates a financial segregation. We cannot face the reality that cities must adapt and must deal with climate change that is happening now. The global South population should not afford with their own lives just to assure more comfortable conditions for richer populations. In that sense, our ambition to have climate actions with a people-oriented approach cannot be realized through small donations or sporadic technical assistance. We need structural changes and long-term commitments. To change our reality, we will need substantive and fast funding, and this funding, this support, need to go directly to subnational governments. Thank you.
Thanks, Camila. I have a question on, you do a lot of work on international collaborations and global alliances in such areas. So what role can such alliances play in the mutual exchange of knowledge and expertise?
Thank you for the question. The city where I came from, Rio de Janeiro, is a city that has deal with large climate events that stress their population. We have like 22% of people living in favelas, which is 4% of the territory. But if you look at this data, you don't think it is so big. But 22% of population in a high-risk area is too much. We have 7 million people in the city. So we realized that we need to enforce a city-to-city diplomacy. And we need to find other kind of investments to diversify the basket, as the other panel was just saying. And Rio is right now, together with the city of Ahmedabad and Buenos Aires, launching a working group in the Urban 20, which is happening at the same time. Launching a working group on how to facilitate financing local and subnational governments. So these 3 cities are leading the way to facilitate the work of other international organizations like the C4 cities and another climate network of cities that works with this thematic for decades. And they are trying to get the government parts on the table to say what exactly cities needs and try to deliver a comprehensive roadmap of actions to the G20. And I think this working group will be continuing for the next year. As you might know, the G20 summit will be in Rio, and we hope to get along with this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Rebecca, over to you. Tell us, what role does the CAG play in all of this?
Yeah, thank you, Anusha, and thanks, ORF, for this dialogue. The UNDP says that 50 to 80% of the climate change response will come from subnational governments. So a good starting point would be the financial capacity of these governments. Now, there are various sources of funding, and one is, of course, because the federal government collects the heft of the taxes, the transfers which go to the subnational governments, there is an incentive for afforestation and ecology, and a state like Meghalaya will get a good chunk because the weightage is 10%. But then there are a lot of other ring-fenced funds, like you have the district mineral fund, which is to reclaim what the mining damages, and they collected around 60,000 crore, which would be around $7 billion US, and of which only 50% could be actually spent. Then we have the compensatory afforestation program funds, which is you sort of cut trees and degrade an ecology in one place, but you somehow compensate by planting trees in another place. I'm not getting into the ecological justice of it, but there also about 8,000 crore, which is about $970 million US, sits there unutilized. There is the coal cess, which is something like the carbon tax, and there is 86,440 crore, which is $10.5 billion US. Only 37% went to the clean energy. We have the disaster relief funds, which is another 3 billion. Then we have the CSR, which is a good area, but then that has also suffered because there isn't a pipeline of projects to target those funds to. Now, all this might seem like big numbers, but just a small drop in the ocean of what we need. But what I wanted to bring direct to your attention is the fact that the governments, because these funds are ring-fenced, mainly to mitigate the risk that they may be used for other purposes. But the problem is that it can cause a fragmented approach, and that the subnational governments will have to be innovative to somehow pool the money from various pockets and put it together into a coherent, prioritized area to have substantial impact, and these funds don't sit there unutilized. There is the other issue of public accountability, because you want that the citizens should know and should be reassured that these funds are actually being used for the purpose that they are meant for. And so when you have, say, for instance, when you have an emergency, a road gets washed away, and when the road gets reconstructed, when we go to audit and we find that there is no trail because basic measurement books, etc., are gone. So you don't want your money to be lost between the cracks of no accountability or of corruption. Climate, what I want to say is that the climate crisis doesn't sit atop the governance machinery. It actually lurks from within. And a very top-down approach, the problem is that it sets the agenda differently. So when you have climate negotiations, it becomes a matter of foreign relations. Or when you have the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which can be quite destabilizing, it becomes one of world trade. We have, or of budgets, because the 2008, we had the National Action Plan. The state action plans were to be in line with that for climate change. But what we find is the state governments normally have fundable projects and reduce the alignment only to budget. What I mean is that we can't let the response be of that, because we've seen, for instance, for the Ganga Action Plan, etc., what happens is a top-down approach gets hijacked by the construction industry, and the contractors just swoop in. So, for instance, in Sundarban, today we mentioned, for which we have Bangladesh also invested in it, because of the intrusion of the sea, they built concrete embankments and they just got washed away. In Ganjam, for instance, again, the sea intrusion, the fishing villages got abandoned. The government rehabilitated them in colonies elsewhere, and they are ghost towns because they are so far away from the livelihood that they were never used. So you know what happens when construction takes over, when contractors take over. And I would end here by saying that it's very important that we put those who are vulnerable, those who actually are bearing the brunt of this climate change, to be on the table, to be able to define the problem as well as find solutions that are closer to their needs and to their lived realities. I just have a word of caution here, and that is that when we talk of community participation, we find that that also has a problem, that there is an elite capture that happens. Those who bear the brunt, can we bring them on? And if nature solves, can we have those people speak for the nature? That's what I would say.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. Now, the CAG is also tying up with international organizations as we know it. So could you just very quickly tell us more about those kind of alliances there?
Yeah, so we have what is called the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, and there are 195 countries. And I had the privilege of setting up the International Center for Audit of Environment and Sustainable Development at Jaipur, and I invite you all to come in there. So we develop tools and guidance and so on. And one of the exciting projects that we are also a part of is the Climate Scanner Project, which is led by Brazil. And what it does is it makes speedy assessments of the government's progress on three fronts, which is governance, policy, and finance, and report quickly as to what have they done for that. So this kind of speedy inputs is one of the areas on which we are working with a whole lot of the 195 SAIs to provide speedy feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Rebecca, you actually set the stage for understanding the larger relationship between, the role of the relationship between man and nature. So I come to you, Mr. Prang Roy. Could you tell us more about your grassroots work in this regard?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to congratulate and thank the Government of India, the G20 Secretariat within the Ministry of External Affairs, the Government of Meghalaya, ORF, and MBDA for this very, very innovative approach towards climate change and linking nature with climate change. And let me just start with a few basic facts that we all know. We live in a world where we have plowed, we have fenced, we have grazed great tracts of the planet, felling trees, killing wildlife, and poisoning rivers and oceans, all to feed ourselves. And yet, when we look around us, millions still go hungry. I belong to the Khasi indigenous community of this area, where, like other indigenous communities living in this part, we have lived here for over 2,000 years. And this is one of the world's richest biocultural diversity spots. And this is because of the unique meeting of the Gondwana plate with the Himalayans and the Asian, Oriental, and the Indo-Malayan areas, which led to the rich biodiversity that are probably found only in this place. And therefore, it is probably the right spot to talk about a nature-based solution, particularly towards climate change. Scientists around the world tell us that there are over 70 billion microbes that combine forces to create life forms so complex that we are only beginning to understand and know how little we know. Science also tells us that sugar sometimes is passed from a very strong tree into a weak or sick tree. And today we know that that is because of a fungi that has to have food to be able to survive, and therefore keeps the whole system alive. Our forefathers did not know all this. And they didn't know the science that we know today. But they knew one thing, which we tend to forget, and that is that we as human beings have a sacred relationship with nature. And that sacred relationship for generations have driven our communities to develop the value of caring and sharing. So if we are talking about nature-based solutions, whatever may be our solutions, the important aspect is to remember that these hills have remained where they are. What you have mentioned just now, the rich biodiversity, it is because of that caring and sharing value that has been the driving force of our work. I was part of the leadership team of the UN in 2021 when they discussed the UN Food Systems Summit. And it was nice to see that there was a gradual movement away from commercial chemical agriculture towards more agroecology, regenerative, or natural farming systems. And because these are systems that recognizes the importance of biodiversity, of soil health, of water quality, of the importance of social, which is mentioned, and cultural aspects, but above all, about the importance of food sovereignty, my right as a community, my right as an individual to grow the food that I want to grow and to eat the food that I want to eat. And this is what you find in indigenous food systems, which unfortunately has been marginalized, which unfortunately has been forgotten. So as we remember nature solves, this is something that we need to work on and see how best we can live. We believe that science has a role. We believe that we mustn't take a romantic view of indigenous people, but there are no silver bullets, either in finance or in technology. But we need to have a co-creation, an intercultural approach, where you combine traditional knowledge, traditional values, and technical aspects for the good of those who have often been bypassed. And I've come here only yesterday, basically to discuss with the government of India, because at the end of 2024, we want to hold a global gathering of indigenous people's food system, where we want to highlight the issues to demonstrate what you have done in the landscape project, the importance of local food, to highlight the best practices that people are doing, and to share with you some of the research we're doing in Northeast India, in Mexico, in Kenya and Thailand about the role of the agroecology products of indigenous food systems. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you also got in the angle of social justice and inclusion. We have about, say, 2 to 3 minutes. Maybe we can go to the audience for a couple of questions.
So my question is for Rebecca, and I was curious to know more your thoughts about specifically the Compensatory Afforestation Act, which can lead to challenges of soil degradation and also social and other land governance issues. And similarly, when you speak about CSR policies, it can have challenges when looking at community mobilization processes, when looking at maintenance and monitoring processes, which might not be accounted for in the time duration of, say, a specific grant. So what kind of local partnerships do you think can help address these issues?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the compensatory afforestation, for instance, the problem is that you have large number of funds, but in different states, there are different problems and there are patchy utilization. There's also a problem of the quality of the forest. So you are actually degrading a very rich forest, and then you are, and in a different place, you are planting trees in another area altogether, and the quality of the forest becomes a problem. But certain areas, so I mean, I think I was just talking to the person here, in certain states like Meghalaya, they don't have a problem of land. But in other places, where is the land for this afforestation? So these are actually, in some way, pardon me for speaking it like this, but it's somehow assuaging our guilt, you know, when we ruin a forest where tribals, etc. live, and then we put it somewhere else, we sort of assuage our guilt. and the money lies there. With the CSR, I actually have an interesting experience when we did the audit of lakes in Telangana, which is in the south of India, and we found that actually the private sector was ready to come up with projects, but because there wasn't a mechanism, there wasn't a policy to guide all that money to prioritized areas, what was happening is they were beautifying the lake with some concrete walk path, pathways, etc., while actually the lake is dead because the inlet has got encroached or the fence has got damaged, and the money would have been better spent doing that than beautifying it. So I think the government has a very important role in laying down a pipeline of projects and having a policy structure to guide the utilization of all these funds, whether it's district mineral funds or is the compensatory afforestation or even the CSR. Now for the green bonds, for instance, the sovereign green bonds have come, and yesterday Neha mentioned about it. Do we have a pipeline of projects for that? That is what is important according to me.
Thank you, and our time is up. So I thank all the panelists, and I think we've definitely set the foundation for having subnational entities to have a greater voice in policy discourse around climate action. With that, we will, of course, this is not the last panel. Like you said, the work has just begun. So thank you, everybody, and thanks for your patience. Thank you. I thank the audience as well.